Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. Each episode will bring you a new topic or interview related to brain health and wellness as part of my mission to help you on the path to a healthier, happier brain. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Anna Charles. Anna is a stop over drinking coach. She helps high achievers to drink less, rarely, or not at all. She's the person they call when they want to take it or leave it. She teaches a simple, doable way to live a full life without worrying what's in your glass. She's also the host of the 90 Days Later podcast. Thank you for joining us today, Anna.
Thank you for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Yeah. And we were talking before we hit record. I love talking to people across the world because we get little different aspects of how things work in different areas. You're currently in Switzerland. I'm in the United States, a little bit different, but same at the same time. We're all the same people down at our core. So this is definitely information that will help anybody who's listening.
Yeah, I work with people around the world, and you're so right. We are humans. That's what we are at the base. We are all human creatures.
Yes, yes. And I used to say, I read that there's a difference between human beings and human doings. And then I heard a podcast guest of mine recently called it human becomings, because we're becoming the next version of ourselves, which I think that fits today's conversation also. So that's another good one. So I always like to start just kind of hearing the backstory. I love to hear the why and what got people to where they are. So can you share with the listeners, say, what got you to where you are today and what you're doing?
Sure. And I will start by saying this was never the career plan. This was not on the horizon. Wasn't to be a coach, let alone a coach around alcohol and to be running my own business. It was never the plan. So my backstory is I was a corporate girl, 25, 30 years. I hate to think how long really, and very senior roles. I sort of went up the career ladder. I was managing at the end hundreds of people. I had a P&L, profit and loss responsibility of over $60 million. And I'd worked all around the world. I had a really lovely life, great family, brilliant job, obviously, lovely children. I just thought I drank a bit too much white wine. I mean, that's really how it started. It wasn't because I was overly stressed or pressurized. It sort of really just became the thing I did. I'd come home from work and I'd pour a glass of wine. And, really the most people say, so what made you want to change? And frankly, it was annoying more than anything, because I'm the sort of person, I value the fact that I think I'm very competent and I can set a goal and achieve it, set a goal and achieve it. So when I realized I was drinking a bit too much, and I'm talking 2-3 glasses, maybe half a bottle, maybe a bottle at the weekend, I thought, I'm just going to knock it on the head. Right? I'm just not going to drink tonight, Anna. Okay, sounds like a good plan. And I couldn't. I mean, it was really, really hard. Notwithstanding 3 pregnancies where it was easy, I didn't drink at all. It was actually really hard. And the idea, it's more the idea of tonight, you're not going to have any wine. It was, it's horrible. And I became very frustrated with this, that I couldn't do it. And I said, right, it's got to stop. Not stop in the sense of, you've got to go sober and you need this, but just you've got to get control back. And everywhere I looked on the internet, it said, if you're drinking too much, you have a problem, you need to go to AA, you need to go to recovery, you need to stop drinking immediately. And it was really heavy, right? It was really, really, and for some people that works, it didn't work for me. And so I thought, I just need to figure this out. And I did. And it was such a miracle, frankly, that I said, I just got to share this. And so that's what I do.
Yeah. And it's not always getting to the point where you feel like you are an alcoholic and you can't live without it, that you needed to make that decision to cut back. Anybody can make that decision. I have gone through times in my life where I've had a drink every day just because, again, this thing to do, never was causing a problem, never caused an issue. But there came a point when I too was saying, maybe I don't need that today. So I had to find a substitute. And it wasn't necessarily a problem for me at that point, but it certainly can be when it becomes a habit. So it's not necessarily an addiction, it just is a habit.
Exactly. I like that distinction because, there are people, and I don't work with people who have a physical addiction, where there's a dependency where they will get the shakes and they cannot operate without. I mean, that's really dangerous territory. That's to stop immediately. That's for doctors. But this habitual conditioned behavior, I say it's like cleaning your teeth. It's like driving to work. You know, sometimes when you drive, you think, how did I get here? I have no idea. I just don't remember anything about the journey. That's what happens. And it can be a scary, and then when you try to change it, and that's when it gets scary, because you think, I really don't want to be doing, and I'm very intelligent and I should know how to do this. And we sort of feel that we're being taken over. And so, yeah, and I always say it comes down to the results you're getting in your life. Like you say, it doesn't have to be a rock bottom. For some people, a glass, just a couple of glasses a week is too much. But we're all a little bit different. But if we're not getting the results in life that we want, then there's a problem. But then we can do something about it without feeling shame or judgment or, oh, I am such a terrible person.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think we fall into that habit to begin with?
Well, you know, I think there's the whole thing when we're growing up. There's all the peer pressure. I mean, I said I trained myself. I mean, I had to work really hard to like wine. I really didn't like it for a long, long time. And then we see everybody around doing it. It's a very normalized thing. I have a glass, okay, I'll have a glass, have a glass of it. And then we start to do that. But the thing about alcohol is it has a huge, huge dopamine response in our brain. We have it and it's like, whoa, it's like the lights are going off, ringing, you know, it's like, and the brain says this is really good, because when we seek pleasure as humans, it's how we're programmed. And then the brain starts to think, hey, when we did that drinking wine thing, we felt really good, because we do feel really good to start with. That sounds like a really something we want to keep in our life. And so we will then start to seek it out. And then every time we drink, we get that reward. It's a drink reward loop. And that's why it's hard to stop, because effectively what we're saying is we are not going to have that lovely reward, because that's how the brain sees it. And we're like, whoa, this seems like a really bad idea. Right? Anna, you're really stressed. You know, those are the things we tell ourselves, and we know that's going to make ourselves feel better. So it becomes self-perpetuating, even though we are trying to fight our way out. And actually, fighting doesn't work.
Yeah.
But that's why, because we are always seeking that reward.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and here on my show, we focus on brain health and wellness. And
Yeah.
when we drink more than we should, even if it's not causing a problem, it can affect our cognitive abilities, our ability to go through our day-to-day life and think clearly.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. And all the things, and you see it most clearly actually when you remove it, when you
Yeah.
remove the over drinking. Something as simple as reading a book after dinner, right? Because my clients will say, my gosh, I love reading, but I'd be reading the same page over and over because I'm not taking it in. I mean, I'm just kind of looking at words. And so that's something that we miss. You know, the other thing is connection. You know, how we connect with people, that's through our brains and our thoughts about the person and how that makes us feel. And we say things, oh, we split a bottle of wine and it's so romantic and I connect. But actually, our listening skills go way down. We have very low emotional intelligence. And we think we're having, it's kind of like this fake pretend reality. We think we're having this glorious time, but actually everything, it numbs. Alcohol not only numbs in our brains the, you know, the not so good feelings, it numbs the really positive stuff. So it really is, it's the simple pleasures. And I say this again and again, you know, this idea of just being able to read at any time, being able to drive at any time, being able to just talk to people and know that they're getting Anna and not this, what are the words that are coming out of her mouth because she thinks she's really cool, but she's talking gobbledygook. You know, when you can kind of look at yourself and think, please be quiet, please stop speaking, but you have less control over your brain. So that all comes back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there have been a few times that I've gone out with friends and I've not been drinking because of whatever reason. And it's almost more fun because you can watch everybody else be a fool and you remember it all.
Haven't isn't it? I think it's amazing when somebody who's very drunk, and this sounds very judgmental, I do not mean it that way. I was that person once, and they come in and they think they're just it, and they just know everything, and then they repeat themselves all through the evening. And the story, it's like, okay, yeah, I've heard this 6 times tonight now. I mean, you must have seen that as well. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
it
It's
is
kind of
quite
comical.
amusing.
It's entertaining. So at least you get the entertainment when you're the one that's not drinking and you can enjoy everything else that's happening. Um,
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't still drink. I do, but it's definitely much more in moderation these days. Um, and I don't even think that I had to make a conscious effort to get to where I am now. But
Right.
for those people that do need to make that conscious effort, how do we go from drinking frequently to making the effort to cut back? What are some of the processes we need to go through for that?
The thing we need to think about when it becomes a habit is in our subconscious. I mean, it's just something that's it's a habitual behavior that we do without realizing we're doing. Just everything like holding this pen, talking to you, sitting upright. These are all things we know how to do. They're in our programming. And I think it's a great way to start. It's just drinking too much. It's just it's in my programming.
Mhm.
Right? So it's just there. But because I don't see it, the first thing you need to like take a salt cellar of consciousness, sprinkle consciousness over it, right? And just start to be aware. Quite simple. That's hard
Mhm.
to start with. I mean, it sounds like, well, that sounds really obvious, but it's actually really hard. And so I say to people, just jot down, see what you can learn about the way it shows up for you. So when do you start drinking, or how are you feeling when you have it? Is it in response to stress? Is it when someone says something? Is it when you're thinking a certain thing? Is it when you see, because we can go along the day's brilliant, and then at 3 o'clock see something and be totally triggered at the idea of drinking that night. Is that happening to you? Write this stuff down, and then you start to see it. And then the next day, and the great thing about this, if you overdrink on a daily basis, every new day, there's another way, another way to go at this. So just start to be more aware. And again, you might, at the end, to start with, you might only catch yourself when you have been drinking.
Mhm.
The more you do this, and you'll get it while you're drinking, and then you'll start to become aware, I'm now at the point when ordinarily this is what I would do.
Mhm.
If you can get that down, then you're getting much more control
Mhm.
over your brain and the habits, and then you can decide to make different choices.
Mhm.
And I don't teach the idea of abstaining from day one and willpowering. I don't find it helps. But if the listeners could just do that one thing repeatedly, I mean, this becomes a new practice, then you start to see it, and then you can start to say, that's really interesting. I wonder if instead of doing this thing at 3 o'clock, I could do this other thing. And then see what works, what sticks for you, because it's a very personal thing.
Mhm. It starts often with substitutions. What can I do instead of this? Because it's
Yeah.
for me especially, it's if I'm doing something, I need to find something else I can do instead of it so that I don't miss that other thing and I still feel fulfilled or whatever bucket I need to fill. It's still getting filled, but in a different way.
Yeah, that's a bit of that's a strain. That's one of those things, and we're dealing with the craving. It's kind of like avoiding or distracting
Eh,
ourselves from it. And what I say is, rather than place, because this is where we get into, well, I'm not drinking all, but I'm really overeating. I mean, I'm eating all the sugar. This is
fair. Yeah.
what happens when we are seeking it. Then when we have this urge, this craving to drink, it comes from a feeling. And I think it's far better to say, how am I feeling right now? So for instance, I always used to drink to feel confident. I didn't realize it at the time. I go to these mega big work things, and I drink for that. And then when I started to realize that actually it was confidence I was seeking, I didn't need the drink for that. And so if we do that, then because if you then we would start overeating to feel confident. I know people who've done that. So we don't need to do the overeating either.
Mhm.
Right? Because once we start to because frankly, when it comes to alcohol and the huge dopamine, and there really probably isn't anything out there that would equate to it. And the whole point of drinking less is we want to experience more of our life.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't want to do a plug and play. It's really about just accepting we're going to be feeling a bit urgy, and we're going to get interested and curious in that, and then work on with our lives rather than saying, right, I think I'll slot this thing in. Even if it's something healthy and productive, it really, over the long term, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Me, it was water, and I just
Okay.
honestly needed to drink more water. So that was probably a good thing.
Oh, that's
Um,
actually not a bad one.
yes.
Yeah.
I did find I wasn't drinking enough water when I needed to. So there was that part. Yeah, I can see how with some things you definitely don't just want to put something else in its place. Um, I just keep thinking there's so many sitcoms where the guys can't speak until they have some kind of alcoholic drink to lubricate their conversation.
We think about, I mean, there's the societal, I mean, it's a really big thing. We talk about it all the time, but I think people don't stop to think really how embedded it is. We talk about Dutch
Yeah.
courage. We talk about drowning our sorrows. We talk about getting the party going. I used to be, this is so weird. I used to be there's a soap opera show, a weekly show in the UK called EastEnders. And when they go down the pub and drink wine, I think, oh, that seems like a really good idea. And I'd be drinking in response to seeing it on the TV. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nuts, bananas, but it really, really is very socialized. And it is one of the few things that if you do own up to say, I think I'm going to knock this on the head a bit,
Hmm.
you will get called out for it. People
Yeah.
tend to, like,
Yeah.
unlike they would if you wanted to give up heroin or smoking or wanted to get fit. I mean, they'd all, yes, that's great, but drinking, it's very different.
Yeah. I have seen more things on social media where people will post about how we need to be okay with somebody says, no, I don't want to drink, not asking, well, why not? Because that gets into the whole thing of almost like a peer pressure. Well, why aren't you drinking? What can we do to get you there? When it does need to be an okay thing to not have that drink there.
It really does, but a lot of people. I mean, I spent hours agonizing. How am I going to say
Yeah.
I don't want the wine? And then if someone buys you a drink and you've decided you're not, and it's sitting there, because then you have the rudeness thing, which is
Hmm.
am I going to not drink, which is being, responding to myself in the way I want, or am I going to come across as rude to my friend who's just spent, $20 on this glass of wine?
Yeah.
So it is becoming more. I think people are also genuinely, the way I was saying to my clients is, if someone calls you out, it might be because they are genuinely interested. How are
Yeah.
you doing that? Right? It
True.
doesn't have to be it's like, I'm actually really intrigued as to how that's possible and why you would do that and all those types of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't tend to beat around the bush on things. So when I've gone out and I didn't want to have a drink, I just flat out say I don't want to have one today. So that's always an option too.
But it is funny how strangers, complete strangers, will come up and say, "What? Why aren't you having a drink?" We went to this fancy thing in Spain. It's this drag art, this whole thing, and I was on the water. It's like, come on, you're not having a shot. I mean, why not? And it's like,
Mm.
because I've chosen, I'm not going to. So
Yeah.
it is very, but it's good that you're just able to say that. But then some will pile on and some won't
Yeah.
listen, and
Yes.
there's
Yes.
nothing you can do about that, and that's up to them.
Yeah. And I
What
think
do
the
you?
more the more the other person has had to have some alcohol themselves, they're going to be a little bit more pushy. I've seen
They
that as
are.
well.
They
Mhm.
are. And I always say I love the expression that you hear a lot, which is, are you going to be spoiling my fun? You're so boring. Are you going to make me drink alone? That's not so much fun. And I always say to
Mhm.
people, the person who's saying that, who are they thinking of?
Yeah.
Thinking of themselves. They
Yeah.
actually aren't thinking of you. So when you say, I don't want it, and you can stick with that, you're thinking of you too.
Yeah.
You're kind of equal there.
Yeah. With people that you've worked with, is there any kind of common theme of pushback that they say, well, I don't know if I can do this because X, Y, or Z?
It is the number one thing that holds people back from getting help, because it's like, okay, I feel really ashamed about this, and B, they're not really not sure. I mean, the number of comments that I'm going to do this. You know, I really feel I need to back myself. And then when I talk to them afterwards, they say, yeah, it was worth every penny, but I really didn't know. And that's because when people come to this, they have generally had multiple attempts, dry Januaries, you know, all the thing. A lot of people come thinking that they're just going to have to abstain, and they probably are going to need to go to AA. They really don't want that. So yeah, heavy on doubt is like the biggest thing. And that's, by the way, the biggest challenge for people to get over, to say yes. But I think once you do that, I teach, let's go to possibility. We aren't taught that in our life. We're taught about what's realistic and what's probable, right? And if you've got 20 years of daily drinking behind you, you're probably going to think it's fairly probable that I got another 20, but no. So let's go to where it's possible, where it's done. By the way, if people listening just do that, just really go into your body, it feels immensely powerful and good. And then I say it's like we're just coloring in the picture to get there. So it's already done. And we are just working to change the behavior to get there. And it happens so slowly. So I love that you talk about being a human becoming, because about halfway through I coach one-on-one, halfway through, I read back to people what they told me, how they presented when we first met. And they always, I think always, yeah, actually always don't recognize the person. Because it has been a slow, gradual change, because that's how we change habits. And they think, oh my gosh, you know, and then they say, I'm really glad I backed myself. But at the time, it was a super scary thing to do.
Yeah. I'm sure it can be scary because of all the social things that we've talked about and how it can be so hard for other people to be okay with that. And I had a friend in this situation one time when I said, let's get together. Should we get together for a drink or something? And she said she didn't drink. I'm like, okay, well, let's get together for ice cream. How can we get people, or how do you work with your clients to encourage them to be okay suggesting other things to do?
We just talk about, what do you want from this? Are you going to see this person because you are going primarily to drink? No, it's just a social construct. So how do you want, so what other ways you could do it? And interesting, I work with men and women, and I think men far more than women, they're, from what I see, they're getting together with blokes. There's the activity, that's a very important part of it. And so we say things like, well, suggest a different time of day. Because if you're meeting at 9 in the morning, you wouldn't expect to have a couple of whiskeys, right? You just wouldn't. So do that. Sporting, something sporty or something outdoors, going for a walk, something like that. So to change those things up. The other thing I say is, you say ahead of time. I mean, if you're meeting up with someone, just say, look, I'm not doing this so much anymore. Yeah, and if you put the horse in the bath, as we say, and if you sort of let people know ahead of time, if they're friends, they'll generally be okay with that if you've gone to that point. So it's just getting a little bit creative. And again, this isn't avoiding. I mean, I would say don't avoid bars. I don't want any of that, because if you do that, if you spend months avoiding bars, when you go into one, it's going to be like, finally, you know, I can do this again. But just to be a little bit creative, and remember, you want to interact with the person. It's not about drinking 10 beers.
So when you're not an alcoholic and you're just trying to cut back on your alcohol, and we go through more time, we're building these habits of not having a drink so often or not having a drink at all. Do you talk to people about not focusing on when they did have their last drink? Because that's always been a confusing part for me. When people do go to AA, they talk about when their last drink was, and that always makes me think you're always focused on that last drink that you had. When do you start looking ahead?
Yeah, no, we don't. I don't look at that. If what I talk about is being intentional and following through on your intentions. I mean, that's essentially it. So we'll have a drink plan that we make ahead, and we'll understand why, and then we'll go ahead and do it. And because, again, I don't teach that alcohol is poison or any of this. It is not a problem having a drink. There's a big difference between drinking just because, you know, you think that sounds like a nice idea, versus drinking because I really feel like that would be a very good thing to do.
Mhm.
So no, we don't look back. If it's all about, so it's about deciding ahead of time and then becoming the person who fulfills that. And so it tapers off, and you naturally drink less and less and less, because you see, actually, I can do it. I can decide I'm going to drink. It starts quite high at the beginning, right? I had a client and she was going to a party, and she wrote a drink plan of 8 drinks. She said, Anna, that sounds awful. I mean, awful, awful. And I said, but how many would you normally drink? She said, I'd probably drink more than that.
Mm.
So we're just going to say 8 to start with.
Yeah.
And the boost that she got, being able to state it and do it, was incredible. And then you start to say, well, what could I do? If anybody ever slips up and overdrinks, always happens. We also then don't go, oh, terrible, back to square one. We say, well, what happened? What happened?
Mhm.
You know, in the same way that I always talk about parking, if you screw up a parking maneuver, you might say, okay, I'm always doing that thing. What could I do differently next time? It's just the same as that, and learn from it and move forward. So you're always moving forward, to your point, rather than looking back. It's
Mhm.
just a different way. I'm not saying AA is bad. I just don't find it helps to look back.
Yeah. That part in particular has always made me just a little curious on it, because I'm like, how does that work if you're constantly reminding yourself of when you did that? It's so hard to move forward, and that's the big thing that you need to do with it. Um, yeah, I started a fitness challenge recently, and one of the things, we had a little
Yeah.
bingo card on it, and one of the things was abstaining from alcohol for 7 days. And I didn't even think about it, and I'm like, well, I did that because I just haven't. I didn't feel the
Yeah.
need to in the last week, so there we go. And people looked at me funny. They're like, wow, what's your superpower? And I'm like, busy with the kids. I don't know, just didn't need to.
Honestly, but it was interesting to see your words that I didn't feel like any, so it came from the feeling, and that's what it is, right? And if
Yeah.
we're feeling that there's this, you have this craving, and then we just follow through on it, because to some people, abstain, whoa, that just sounds like, I mean, why would you want to do that? And we
Yeah.
have to change our thoughts about this, right? Because if we're going through saying that's going to be really, really, really hard, I'm not sure if it could, I mean, it can be hard, but then we created a struggle. But this is again back to the brain, by
Mm.
what we make it mean.
Mhm.
If it could be like you say, it sounds like you're approaching this as, this is a great challenge, I get to tick the things off. But if you're thinking, oh, I can't wait till this is over, then it's going to be horrible, and you're probably not going to learn anything. And you're certainly, it's the
Yeah.
horrible experience is going to be negative, and the likelihood of repeating it, very low. And
Yeah.
that's where we get stuck in alcohol, because it's, oh, it's so much fun. Life is going to be kind of like this wilderness, gray wilderness of boringness, and it really isn't.
Yeah, no, life can be just as fun without the alcohol. I've always joked that I'm more fun without alcohol than I am with, even. So, yeah, I can be obnoxious regardless. But it's a fun obnoxious. So
Well, that's good. And I say, if people say I'm boring without it, it's like, okay, maybe I'm boring. I mean,
it's okay to
go
be
me.
boring sometimes too. It's
That's
all good.
okay. Yeah, yeah, I don't mind.
So, do you have any projects coming up, or anything that you wanted to share with our listeners regarding what you work on with people?
Really, what I'm doing right now is just really building up, doing sort of my one-on-one coaching things. I do work with the organization called Moderation Management, which is a fantastic organization. They're not for profit, and they're really there to help people achieve moderation. And I'm going to be running a webinar, sort of a workshop for them around accountability, which is a lot of fun. So that's towards the end of July. So if people want to look that up, moderation management, when we're going to be creating our own accountability plans. Because that's another thing I find with this, is people are always seeking accountability from outside of them. And it's like, it can start with you. It really
Yeah.
needs to start with you. So I'm going to be doing that. But otherwise, really just getting the word out, coming on, speaking with lovely people like you, because I want people to know there is no shame. There is no shame in asking for help about this, whether you want to work with a coach like me, or you want to go to AA, or whatever it is. It's totally fine thing to do. So I think that's just an important part of this work.
Yeah, that's a really, really good thing to identify too. asking for help is the new strong. So we always used to say that people were strong and they had to be strong and not ask for help and do things by themselves. But sometimes we can't get ourselves through things, even though we know we need to make a change, regardless of how minute or large the change might be. And just asking for that help that's your strength, that's your superpower.
Totally agree. And I say, if you wanted to landscape your garden, if you knew nothing about it, if you'd spent 30 years, having weeds growing and things, I mean, you aren't going to sit there and think, oh, I'm just such a terrible person. I can't grow flowers. And yet when it comes to alcohol, we sort of go into this, oh, it's just something wrong with me. I love that asking for help is the new student. And again,
Yeah.
it's we're working with the brain. This is about understanding how our brains are functioning. And I would say that if you've got a habit, your brain is just working really well.
Mhm.
That's what we're designed to do. We just need to harness that power in a different direction, to your point earlier about focusing on something that we want rather than we don't want.
Yeah. Yeah. You've built a habit, so you did something successful. So now you just need to choose, is that the habit that I want to continue?
Exactly, because our brains don't know really the difference. Well, they don't know the difference between a good habit and a bad habit. And in fact, we are the ones who put that judgment on. I mean, arguably, you could say if you drink easy, find it easy to drink, somebody could say that's a great habit, right? That's up to them. I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing, I mean, I tend to not think it is, but it doesn't, it really is just, it's how we are designed to work so that we can work efficiently and we can just change the engineering backstage.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your one-on-one and this you mentioned the thing coming up in July, but where else can they find
Yeah,
you? Yeah.
the best place is my website, 90dayslater.co, so .co, and that's 990. And I'm on all the normal socials and Instagram, 90dayslater.co. So that's where you can find me. And then moderation management, I think it's moderation.org. But come to me first and I can direct you to all of them. They do some wonderful, wonderful events.
Perfect. I'll include all of those in the show notes so people can find you, because if they're driving, I don't want them writing things down. Um, and then I think we could probably go on for all day because we seem to be driving pretty well, but anything less, any last information that you want to share with our listeners or words of wisdom that you want to kind of close out on?
I think in addition to what I was saying earlier about start to pay attention to the habit, that's how you would start, is start to really understand how you're feeling. We drink because we want to feel good, so at the base of it, and how that manifests is we are drinking because we have a feeling we don't want. So for instance, we might be feeling stressed, we want to feel relaxed, or because we are seeking a feeling, so we want to feel relaxed. That's all it is. And again, the more you can tap into understanding how you're feeling and really feeling not just awful, good, but am I feeling relaxed, stressed, frustrated, joyful? The more you do that, you become much, much, much more aware, because it's all about awareness.
Mhm. Mhm. I love it. Be aware, pay attention to yourself.
Pay attention to yourself. Absolutely. Yeah.
Good deal. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thanks a lot, Mindy. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this with others to help me continue on with my mission to help people live healthier, happier lives. Go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to see what I'm up to and get links to all the social medias there. See you next time.